So we can talk about the execute SQL task in SSIS. This is the one. Okay. So entire SSIS లో మీరు మోస్ట్లీ యూజ్ చేసేది వెల్ అండ్ గుడ్ కి ఫేవరెట్స్ లో ఉన్న టూ ఆల్వేస్ ఏ ప్యాకేజ్ లో అయినా యూజ్ చేయాల్సి వచ్చేవి ఇవి రెండు. ఓకే. సో ఈ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ సీక్వెల్ టాస్క్ అంటే ఏంటి అంటే, సో execute SQL task can be used to run the SQL queries against to any server. Okay. So it will support the number of connections such as OLEDB, ODBC, Excel, ADO, ADO.NET, SQL Mobile. These many connections it will support. Okay. And after executing the SQL query, it will return the results in the form of three ways. One is single row, or else full result set, or else XML. Okay. And how you can pass the SQL query to this execute SQL task means in a three ways. Direct input, that means we can directly give the query here. Direct input means, so when it comes to the file connection, so the SQL query, it should be read from the file. That means the entire SQL query with the help of .SQL file. Okay. Another one, variable. That means that SQL query which is coming from the variable. Okay. So we have more flexibility to call the stored procedures. Of course, even if stored procedures are expecting input or output parameters also, we have a more flexibility to call them with the help of, execute SQL task. Okay. So మీరు ఇక్కడ గమనిస్తే we have different types of connections, right? Like OLEDB, ODBC, Excel, ADO, ADO.NET, SQL Mobile. Okay. When it comes to the OLEDB, of course, like data flow, which purpose we have used to connect with the RDBMS servers. The same way here. For example, let me create the new SSIS package. Okay. So I would like to rename it as the execute SQL task, right? ETL underscore execute SQL task. Okay. So I have taken the execute SQL task into my design pane. If you double click it, then it will open the execute SQL task editor. Totally, there are 4 tabs actually. One is general tab. Second one is parameter mapping, results, expressions. So this last tab we can explain, at the end of the course. Okay. So which is useful while doing the dynamic in a way. By the time we can use these expressions, as of now, we are focusing on general, parameter mapping, result set. Okay. When it comes to the general, the first tab general, again in the general we have 4 tabs actually: general, options, result set, SQL statement. In the general, the task name and task description, that is okay. When it comes to the options, timeout, code paste, and type conversion mode. Timeout 0, it is the indication of, for example, you are trying to connecting with the Oracle. Okay. 0 means based on the server configuration, the connection, it will try to access the system. For example, while authenticating, for example, in that server, they have configured only 30 seconds. Within that 30 seconds, the authentication was not succeeded, then the task will fail. Okay. By the time, if you want to make the authentication of 60 seconds, then you're supposed to give the 60 here. After 60 seconds, okay, it will try to timed out if the server is not respond for your authentication. Okay. Like that code paste, we have a 1252 is the code paste by default code paste, which is related to, our English US. Okay. Type conversion mode means it's a, for example, you are getting the data from, once your stored procedure is executed, you are getting the values or data into the parameters or variables or something. By that time, so the data, it should be allowed to convert to the respective data type. That is the meaning of allowed. When it comes to the result set, here none means our query was not returning any results. When you select the single row, that means our SQL query was returning single record. For example, our SQL query was returning table of results by the time full result set. For example, our SQL query was returning the result in a XML format. By the time we can use the XML. Okay. When it comes to the SQL, as of now, I'm going to keep this result set property as a none. Okay. This is also, I would like to change it as a default value 0. When it comes to the SQL statement, the first one is connection type. Here, this is by default, it is, pointed to OLDB. Other than OLDB, we have a Excel connection, ODBC connection, ADO connection, ADO.NET connection, SQL mobile. Of course, Excel means, for example, నీకు ఒక రిక్వైర్మెంట్ చెప్తా ఎక్సెల్ ఎక్కడ యూజ్ చేస్తాము అనేది. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ఈ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ సీక్వెల్ యూజ్ చేసుకుని ఎక్సెల్ కనెక్షన్ ఎందుకు యూజ్ చేస్తామంటే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, యూ సపోజ్ టు ప్రొడ్యూస్ ద డైనమిక్ ఎక్సెల్ షీట్స్ dynamically. Okay, sheets dynamically. Inside the workbook, we have a sheets. So if you want to produce that sheets dynamically, by the time we can use this Excel connection manager. Okay, whereas OLDB, for example, you have a situation, if you want to execute the stored procedure, so by the time we can use OLDB, or else if you want to run some inline queries, by the time we can use this OLDB. ODBC, of course, are the different provider like OLDB. Okay, when we will use the ADO means, for example, ఒక ఆబ్జెక్ట్ వేరియబుల్ అనేది ఉంది, నీ పేరెంట్ టాస్క్ అనేది ఆబ్జెక్ట్ వేరియబుల్ కి డేటా ఇస్తుంది. ఆ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ వేరియబుల్ ని యూజ్ చేసుకొని సంథింగ్ యూ సపోజ్ టు బిల్డ్ ద లాజిక్. సో బై ద టైమ్ వీ కెన్ యూజ్ ADO. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ADO.NET, ద నెక్స్ట్ వన్. సో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, నువ్వు ఒక సర్వర్ కే కనెక్ట్ అయ్యావు ADO.NET కనెక్షన్ ద్వారా, సేమ్ లైక్ OLDB లాగే. సో దాంట్లో స్టోర్ ప్రొసీజర్స్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయాలన్నా, ఇన్లైన్ స్టేట్మెంట్స్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయాలన్నా, we can use. When it comes to the SQL mobile, it's a kind of messaging system. I mean, you should not see them in the real time. Okay, why? Because it is very old actually. SQL mobile is very old. It's a kind of messaging system which is happening between the two applications. Okay, so now I am selecting the OLDB. For example, I have a SQL server. I would like to execute one stored procedure which is there in SQL B13 database. For example, there is no stored procedure, sir. For example, I will like to connect to the another server. We can see. Okay. For example, here it is. These all are the user-defined stored procedures in my SQL batch that file database. Okay, like these all are the SPs. I would like to call any one stored procedure from my SSIS package. For example, let me check. So is this one is allowing any parameters? Oh, this is also accepting the parameter. Get numbers, end number. Okay. For example, dynamic table creation, get 30 days sale. Order date, input ga iవ్వాలి. This is not the right data, population, employee name. Yeah. So, for example, this is the stored procedure I would like to call from SSIS package. which is doesn't have any input or output parameters. Okay, just consider. So let's copy that statement. First, you're supposed to select the connection type as OLEDB. So I would like to create the connection for that particular OLEDB. So that is, this is the one, right? This is pointed to Adventure Works, but our SP is there in SQL batch 12 database. Okay. So here, this is the server name. Authentication is Windows authentication I am going with. So the database is SQL batch 13, text connection, succeeded, click OK. Okay. So the SQL source type direct input I am taking. So click on Eclipse button. Here you can copy paste your query. Okay. So if your stored procedure is returning the results, by the time you're supposed to make it as a what kind of results it is returning, either single row or full result set or XML. Okay. If you select here, then only the result set tab will become enabled. As of now, it was in disable mode. Why? Because here we are mentioned the result set is none actually. Okay. If you make it as, for example, full result set. Okay. By the time if you see, the result set is enabled. So here with the help of add, you can add the variables and store that result in the variable. Okay. So as of now, so I don't have any results. Just consider this SP was not returning any results. Okay. So this is the simple one. So click OK. Now, if you execute it, SP is executing. Okay. The SP is executing. Okay. If you see here, the execution is completed. Here it is. Okay. In such a way, we can call the stored procedures as well. Okay. For example, how to get the, for example, your query is executing. For example, one inline query. Okay. So I would like to store the results after being my query is executed. I would like to store those results in the, in one of the variable. For example, okay, I have one query, for example, which is select from sales order header. So max of, okay, sales order, max of total due as total sale, as max sale, for example. Okay, this query it was returning single value. Okay, for example, I would like to convert it as an integer. Okay, instead of this question values, I would like to convert it as an integer. Yeah. Okay, this is the query I would like to execute it. For example, here OLEDB connection, of course, I am okay with that. Okay, as a direct input, I am taking. This is my query. So my query was returning single row. That means, okay, go to the result set. And here I would like to store that value in a variable. Click on add. So the result name is nothing but this name. Or else if you don't know the name, you can give the 0. Like that, you have a flexibility to pass number of variables based on your result set. Okay, variable. So I would like to store that value in a variable, right? So my variable is max sale. Okay, I would like to keep into 64 data type. Why? Because here it is returning a big number. Okay, so the variable must be specified for the selected type variable 0, give 0. So what it will happen when this particular execute SQL task is executed, by the time it will get the value and it will store it in here. Okay, if you want to see, then we can see. No, you cannot see without something it is written in. Okay, I got it. I got it. I got it. Why it is failed? As a result set name law, if you give this name, it should not work out. You're supposed to give index position only. Okay. So now if you execute it, it will execute without having any issue. Why still it is failing? Invalid object name. Invalid object name. Oh, sorry. That's right only. Okay. Mali rollback చేశాను. Okay. Why it is failing means this connection it was pointed to SQL batch 12 database. But మనకి table ఉంది ఎక్కడ Adventure Works 2019 అదే server లో. So I would like to create the another connection then. Okay. New connection. చూసుకోండి ఆల్రెడీ మనకి రీసెంట్ లిస్ట్ లో ఉంది. Done. ఇప్పుడు ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయండి. యా చూడండి ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అయిపోయింది. ఓకే, నువ్వు ఆ వాల్యూని ఇంకా నీ బిలో టాస్క్స్ లో యూజ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు ఇలా. ఓకే, సో అలాగే ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ నీ క్వరీ వచ్చేసరికి మల్టిపుల్ వాల్యూస్ రిటర్న్ చేస్తుంది. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ సెలెక్ట్ ఫ్రమ్ sales order details. Okay, for example, this is your query. Sales order ID. Sales order ID. Okay, total due. For example, line total. Okay, alage product ID. ఇలా మల్టిపుల్ కాలం వాల్యూస్ రిటర్న్ చేస్తుంది. ఇప్పుడు దీనికి రిజల్ట్ సెట్ ప్రాపర్టీ ఏం తీసుకోవాల్సి వస్తుంది? మనం ఫుల్ రిజల్ట్ సెట్ తీసుకోవాల్సి వస్తుంది. ఎందుకంటే మనకి వస్తుంది టేబుల్ ఆఫ్ రిజల్ట్స్ కాబట్టి. సో ఫస్ట్ లెట్ మీ క్రియేట్ ద కనెక్షన్. ఓకే, సో ఇక్కడ ఫుల్ రిజల్ట్ సెట్ తీసుకొని, ఓకే, go to the result set and add the result set name. You supposed to give it as a 0. Okay, variable name I would like to create it as a new, and sales order details. Okay, the value type is object. Don't forget this is the object. Simply click OK. So what it will happen once this query was executed, then the entire results it should be stored in inside that object variable. Inside that object variable. This is system.object. Okay, so even we have a flexibility to pass the parameters as well. For example, this is my query. I would like to pass the parameter where product ID equal to question mark. I don't know runtime which value it will come to this product ID. Okay, I would like to pass the parameter. Okay, simply what I will do, I will first create the connection. Okay, so SQL statements. So here we have a question mark. Okay, so if it is returning the results, of course I would like to keep the result set as a full result set. So go to the result set and map the variable name. like 0. So for example, object variable, this is the one I would like to pass. Here it is accepting the parameter as well. Why? Because there is a question mark. So for the parameter also, we can pass the parameter here. For example, the parameter, mm, the the value. For example, I have a one variable that is prod ID, okay, which is int data type. For example, 711 is the product default value I have given. Now this prod ID I will pass it to this one as a parameter. Okay, if you come to the parameter tab, so here you're supposed to select the respective variable, which is, so the direction is input only. We are giving the value as input. Other than input, we have output and return value. So we are giving the input value, and that particular variable, the data type, it is long. Long is nothing but integer. Like that, we have a null, numeric, var, short, signed char, okay, u large char, u long, short, var, variant bool. They are very similar to the, all the data types which were there in the SQL server. Okay, here the parameter name, it should be 0. Okay, the index position. The parameter size, it is -1. That means -1 means default value. How much value it is coming from this particular variable, that value it will pass it to as a parameter. So at the runtime, it will pick the value first for the product ID parameter, and it will pass it to this query, and it will execute. And based on the execution result set, it will store those results in the result set window, result set variable. Okay, this is the way we can pass the parameters as well. Okay, so